Hey guys, welcome back to On Our Terms, hosted by moi, Ismatou Bah, the big sis that fucks up so you don't have to. As usual, let's set some ground rules. This is not a safe space. It's a brave space, so let's be brave. In honor of that, Mummy, I'm a professional finesser, featuring Flo and Ngala. Flo is an African-American photographer and photojournalist best known for her street, celebrity, and portrait photography. A daughter of West African immigrants, she credits life as a first-generation American from Harlem, kickstarting a cultural, inspiring path to photography. Her work has appeared in front covers of New York Times, Billboard, and Essence magazine. In 2022, she became the first Black woman invited by Vogue to photograph inside the Met Gala. Ngala's career started in 2017 as a personal photographer to Cardi B, who was then up and coming. Oh, I didn't know that. The native New Yorker went on to document what she coined celebrity photojournalism for the likes of Stacey Abrams, Sarah Jessica Parker, Method Man, Wizkid, and more. In 2023, she made Forbes 30 Under 30 list and recently plans to venture into her first creative agency endeavor, Flo in Focus. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I know you just got off a flight because you were traveling. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, July 4th weekend is like always one of those things where it's like, are we celebrating? Are we not celebrating? So I think when we first talked about it, I thought I was going to Chicago with a friend, and then I ended up in LA, and then I went to Napa, and here I am with you. So very excited to be here with your homies as well. So y'all can't see, but there's a studio. Her tribe is here, live and direct.
Well, today I have you in here because you are the Flo. Like, I don't think you understand, but like being in prep, and also Flo is in prep.
29.
Period.
Contingent 29.
Represent. And you were the first creative alum that we saw. Cool. For the longest, we were always talking about, wow, everyone just works at JP Morgan and Bloomberg, everyone is
so cool.
Yeah. And so we were like, where are the creatives? And when Prep published an alum update of you, that was the first time we discovered you, and we were like, oh my God, there's a creative out here doing their thing, finessing. And so I really want to kind of get into your background and kind of let everybody know. I know I mention prep all the time, so at this point people probably we know everything about this program, but we're gonna do it again and we're gonna talk about your experience. What was it like growing up in Harlem? Because I know you are a proud Harlemite. So
for sure. Well, I think one, shout out to you for mentioning prep every chance you get. But yeah, I grew up in Harlem, born and raised. In Harlem Hospital, graduated from City College, which was down the block. I interned at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and that's one of the biggest, if not the biggest, research center that has all of the material of the diaspora. I feel I should know the official term, but that was 2017, 2016. So a lot of my life really happened on a square mile of 125th to 135th Street. Mm-hmm. And I grew up figure skating at Riverbank State Park. So Harlem is really, really home for me. And right now I relocated to Miami for the first time ever. I'm living somewhere else. But I think that growing up in Harlem and specifically my intro to prep kind of came, similar to all of our parents, just wanting the best for their children. My parents didn't know anyone when they got here. They immigrated in 1992. I was born in 95, and I was the first girl. I have 3 siblings, so there's 4 of us. So I'm number 2 in the lineup, and I think they just saw, I was a talkative, outgoing, bold kid. I was always in the gifted and talented programs, those little in public school, sometimes they have those sub programs. I got into this school called Delta, which no one else had gotten into my school. And I just felt like they just kept pushing me to just do more and do more. And then my dad was also an academic. He had a double master's from this school called Ahmadu Bello University, which is a really historic university in Nigeria. Yeah. And he came to this country to pursue a doctorate at NYU. So all of that kind of led up to, 10, 15 years later, you have a kid, of course, you're going to throw them in a great, ABC or Oliver or a prep program. And I'm just happy I got in.
So your parents found out about prep for prep?
What'd you say?
Your parents knew about prep for prep?
Yeah, so my school, I think just knew or had a counselor program or something that told them about it. And then I applied. And then, like I was the only one from my school that got in. I went to my middle school for a year, and then I went to Horace Mann from 7th through 12th grade.
How has your experience as like going through prep, going to Horace Mann, going to City College, how has that kind of influenced your photography career?
I think it's not as linear as like, like the question may sound, but it's really great to like have to ask myself this like every time I get asked like, oh my God, like what's the connection? What's the, photography was not like my plan A. I just,
What was your plan A?
Art directing and advertising. And
wow, really? Director. Advertising?
Yeah.
Because I work in advertising.
Yeah. So I don't know if we spoke about that when we first linked up, but I wanted to be a creative director. I was a big Tumblr head, like loved Tumblr so much. And I didn't realize that people could like be creative and like make things or craft things for a career. So
the Tumblr era is, I feel like, very influential to a lot of the creatives that are actually like really doing their thing right now. I feel like it's such an era. Like I try to explain it to people who are not from New York and they just don't get it. Like the Soho Kid, like Lucas Bah era. I don't, and like it was such a huge, like I don't feel like we have platforms like that, honestly, that like kind of incubate like creatives and culture like the way Tumblr has. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but I feel like it was just such a cultural moment.
It's tricky because everyone gets everything from everywhere. If that makes sense. Like, so people will find that same inspiration in TikTok and Instagram and Pinterest and whatever. So,
really? In the same way like you'd feel like in the way that like culture was incubated on Tumblr?
Absolutely. I think wherever there's community and a platform and ability to create, I think people will take what they will from it. So for me, Tumblr just was that. But I think you can ask someone the same question or someone would give the same answer for Twitter or for Facebook, for whatever the case may be. So I felt like the creativity really started like in my community in Harlem, just growing up, like literally on Lenox Avenue. I grew up across the street from like the famous Sylvia's restaurant. My family and their family were cool. And like my mom used to do like the hair of her grandkids and her kids. And I feel like just being right next door to 125th Street, because we were on 126 in Lenox.
Yeah.
Being right next door.
Right there.
Literally
like right off 125th.
Literally right there. So Corner Social is like a bar that's there now, but that's exactly where God. Like my parent, like that was where the store was.
Yeah.
And so I feel like a little bit of part of like Harlem.
Your parents were entrepreneurs.
They were entrepreneurs, absolutely.
What kind of store did they own in Harlem?
It was a hair braiding and beauty supply store and then a calling card center as well.
Calling cards.
Do you remember that?
Yes, my mom used to make me run down to pick up a boss card for her, like a $5 boss.
They don't. If you know, you know. Like the calling card era. Even now, I'd be like, Mom, you can use Skype, you can use WhatsApp, and she'll be like, I'll go get a calling card. I'm like, it's 2024.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like,
oh no, my parents. I think WhatsApp and like all those apps are like the best things that ever happened to the immigrant community. Like it just changed the level of connectivity that they have. Like in just such a incredible way. Nobody talks about that a lot, but like it's just incredible.
I feel like just to go back to Harlem and prep, I just think with, like you said, with WhatsApp and community, it's just important to create those spaces. So for me, like Harlem was that in a little bit of a way, and then I think prep was my next example of, actually no, my figure skating program, figure skating in Harlem was my next example of community, and then prep, and then I went on to Horace Mann, and so all was like a melting pot. But ultimately, photography was discovered at Horace Mann. It was an elective in high school. I didn't major in it. I really was not planning on being an artist. I didn't even consider myself an artist until probably college. One of my neighbors was like, I think you're an artist, and it took a while for me to accept it because I just felt I was someone with a camera, like just documenting what I saw. But ultimately it changed my life. So I'm really grateful I took that leap of faith. I was interning at an agency called Droga 5. I also did an internship in like San Francisco, and I did this like national like ad competition where you basically like pitched your creative work to explain why you should get a job in advertising. So I basically had to like stand on...
Was this in college or in high school?
This was like right after college, so 2017. So I had to stand on stage. It was me and like 9 other contestants, and we had to explain why like our art form made us like eligible for the job we wanted in advertising. So there was like a comedian, one of my best friends who I just like left visiting in California. She was like a painter, but she wanted to be like a producer, and I was a photographer. I wanted to be a creative director. So I had no art direction or creative direction portfolio, but I had like early photography work. And I basically was like, well, I know how to see things. I understand color. I understand composition. I understand curation and editing. And I just had to like pitch that. And then from there, I got the chance to be an intern. while I was an intern, I started working with Cardi here and there. And then when I was actually going to take a job in advertising, the person who put me on to working with Cardi, who was like a music mentor of mine, she was like, why are you going to have a job in the corporate world if you are clearly an artist? And I was like 22 and very impressionable. And I was like, okay, forget it. Like, I'll just take a chance on this photography career. And it worked out.
Yeah, was it like hard graduating and like, you know, everybody, especially in like the prep sphere, I feel like sometimes go into those like corporate McKinsey, Bain. Was it like kind of hard? Like, and you know, like I feel like we're kind of groomed to kind of, you know, love the pedigree. Like you love the like I feel like sometimes like I fell into the trope of like, you know, I love the idea of like people being like, oh, you work in big tech or you work in...
Yeah, I think like I remember feeling so like insecure about like, you know, in the brownstone, they have like everyone's, the colleges and everything. So I grew up with my parents being like city school, like state school. And I ended up going to a SUNY and then a CUNY. And I also ended up graduating from Horace Mann with like a 2.8 GPA. Like I did not do well in the school. I also lost my father like while I was in the school. So I didn't realize I had like early like ADHD, like distraction, like just honestly like depression, which is part of where photography like literally saved my life at that age. And I didn't realize until like in hindsight, I look back at like my Facebook albums that I would put up when I was like 15, 16, and they're like black and white. And it's like literally the brownstone my parents had in Harlem that we were losing for, like through gentrification. And like, it was kind of a dark time, all these different things. And like you said, with, you know, the prep community, I don't think there was that space for like arts, you know, or even at Horace Mann, like people were going to MIT and UPenn and all this stuff. So I feel like, you know, there wasn't that space for, I don't know, an art community. And I think that's why I latched onto Tumblr so heavily. I didn't feel like it was a bad thing, you know, to like not go to a great school, but I definitely felt something along the lines of like, just that comparison of like, oh, like, am I supposed to be doing something else? Or should I be like, you know, with my peers, like Harvard or whatever. I also really wanted to go to Wesleyan and didn't get in. And I really remember crying. I was like in AP Latin, which was like something I took in prep and then went on to do at Horace Mann. I will never forget.
Prep offered Latin?
Yeah. You guys didn't have Latin?
No.
See, that's why prep is better than prep.
Oh. Yeah. You know, I was holding back saying baby prep, but baby prep. I was holding it back.
But no, I literally was in Latin class and I was like, I didn't get into Wesleyan. I applied like ED, like of course, like, girl, you got like a 2.8 GPA. You didn't get into Wesleyan. But I tried. And I think my charisma and my energy, you know, was helpful in me kind of making it through Horace Mann. Like, even though my academics weren't where I wanted them to be, I definitely left a bit of a mark there, just as far as like, I was like a student ambassador. I ended up being like a big photography, you know, student there. I got like the honors award or whatever.
Yeah, I saw.
You know, I started like a little business there with my best friend. It was called, my best friend at the time.
Yeah.
It was called P1N5, and we would like print out like these photoshopped like not marketing, but like Photoshop buttons, and then we would take pictures and market them in Harlem. So that's really where my creativity like had the space to grow, and the resources at Horace Mann helped.
Your entire family is like very entrepreneurial too.
Yeah, for sure.
How would you say, like, you know, immigrant parents, obviously there's like the whole saying of like doctor, lawyer, all that stuff. Would you say your parents were like super supportive? I know you said that your dad was an academic.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing your mom was also an academic. And so
my dad, well, he passed away when I was 13. So I was in 8th grade, literally like my first year at Horace Mann. And then, going into my second year at Horace Mann. So he never got to see me like pursue the arts. I think that, if I remember correctly, I kind of wanted to do like maybe like law or like forensic science or something, which is so random. But I was like one of those kids who watched the, you know, like the mystery shows like, when you weren't supposed to at home. So I always was like just, you know, interested in being investigative, like kind of early, just like journalism, you know?
Yeah.
I liked a little bit of like, you know, understanding clues lead to, you know, solving problems.
Yeah.
And there was that. My mom, I think, you know, she married and fell in love with someone who's an artist, even though he was an academic / entrepreneur. My dad also like was a brilliant like calligraphist. I don't know if that's the right word, but he was like, he would like write the like diplomas like for like ABU, and like there's clippings we have of like him and like Douala, the Cameroon, like his arts and design. Wow. Like he did design. Okay. So he was really just like I feel like I don't know, just like a multi-hyphenate in that sense. So I feel like if he was alive, he would have, supported it. I like to think he would even have like helped me like manage my career a little bit if he was still here, because he was just really brilliant. And I felt like, I would come back from my prep classes and he would literally like go through, the work with me. He was very supportive in my entire academic journey. So I would like to think that if he was still here, he would have supported my art journey too. But I also feel like I have no idea how my life, would have turned out.
Yeah.
So,
would you say your mom was like super? I mean, it feels like I feel like a lot of the articles and like just a lot of your posting on social media, your mom is like your biggest supporter, I feel.
Yeah, my mom is so awesome because she's really a go with the flow. Like, she had a kid named Flo, and I feel like she really just, she's been rocking. I remember being younger and being like, oh, like, I feel like I'm such a great artist, but like no one knows who I am. And I would get really down about just, before the algorithm was like a thing, there was still like a method of like, certain artists or photographers whose names were more out there. And I don't know how it actually worked then, but I just remember feeling like I didn't get like the shine I wanted. That was like, I don't know, early college, like, just natural like imposter syndrome / wanting to just, make it. And I think my mom always said to me like, that what was for me would be for me. She would just encourage me in many ways. Just, she's a very like prayerful, classic African Nigerian mom.
Yeah.
And then when I started working with celebrities, she definitely took to learning like as I went along. Like, she would just be like, okay, well, who's Gucci Mane? Okay, well, who's Cardi B? Like, what's Atlantic Records? Like, literally she would, like kind of Google and understand that. Like, she'll at any given moment now just like whip out like, her phone and be like, you have Instagram? Go to Instagram. Go look at Flo and Ngala. And like, she'll literally do that. So she's like my personal publicist. But yeah, I love her. Shout out to moms.
I kind of want to go back to what you were saying before about like Horace Mann and like, you said you lost your father your second year when you were there. And you graduated 2.8 GPA. And I really resonate with that because I struggled when I was in boarding school. Like, I was not okay mentally. And I feel like, I didn't necessarily have the support that I needed to thrive. Like, I feel like I ended up okay. Like, I was okay. Like, I somehow managed to get into NYU.
Literally,
yeah, but like, I feel like looking back at it, there were so many red flags. Like, I was very clearly not okay. And I wonder if that was your experience, like looking back at your Horace Mann experience. Do you feel like there was, I mean, you said that your art and like Tumblr like saved you during the time, but it was like clearly a dark time. And looking back at your photos, your Facebook photos from back then. And so I guess, how was that experience for you, like post?
So my Horace Mann experience was about 6 years long. So I did 2 years of middle school, 4 years of high school. I feel like the best part was just the access to the resources. Like, that school, the campus was so big. Like, I would just be there. I would just be on campus. I feel like after school, we would have this thing called Homework Center, Academic Center. And I remember just kind of like being on campus. And I don't know if it's because like I didn't really have another place to go, or I just, found my own little community, there, and just like to stick around them. But maybe a blend of both, right? I always knew I was smart. I feel like, there's a world where we could just click our fingers and have, been A+ students at our schools, or just, been honor roll, or whatever the case may be. But
I used to tell myself, I used to be like, oh, like I could have worked a little bit harder. Like, when I just graduated,
same,
I'd be like,
same.
But it's like, I kind of feel like I know I couldn't have, because I was going through a lot.
So I feel like sometimes when and I still struggle with this now, if it's like, you can do something, like, you'll almost be like, oh, I can do it. So like, whenever I want to do it, I'll just do it. So that's kind of like the Delulu mentality I had. I was like, oh, like, whenever I want to like study for Latin, I'll do it. So I would just like, it was so bad. I would go home, be on Facebook, be on Tumblr. Like, literally I was like a social media addict. Didn't even know that was what was going on. I was in therapy in my school, and then my figure skating program also put me in therapy, because I was just like, honestly just falling off. Like, I was running late to practice. I just stopped caring. And I didn't have that discipline. I didn't have that person to be like, girl, get up, like, go to school. You know what I'm saying? My mom was there, but, she had 4 kids, like, widowed in America, losing our home, like, it was a lot. Even saying it gives me chills because it's like, to your point, it's like I actually was not okay. And it was hard to go to school and see like, the Longchamp bags and the Juicy Couture this and like just the environment of private school and the average girl and the average Black girl or girl of color. It's like I actually had friends who were older and younger because I think even in my year, I had like one or two good friends that I felt like, understood me. Mm-hmm. But you kind of have to look for, those people, find your people and your tribe, right? So yeah. I think I was okay because of the resources.
Were there?
But I think I was not okay, like, for like the the other reasons, like going home. It was a different situation.
Would you say there was faculty like supporting you in your photography?
Yes,
and like that, like maybe like saw this is like Flo is really responding well to this, and like this is a safe space for her.
Yeah, so my photography teacher, Miss Karen Johnson, shout out to her. She was also my homeroom teacher, so we spent a lot of time together. She's like in her 70s now, lives in Kansas City, and I'm actually working on a book, and I've like decided, okay, like I need to work with my high school photo teacher because I don't know, there's something about it that just felt very like full circle, like this is where it all started. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we would sit and talk like very intimately and very openly about what was going on. And I think when you're in a certain age or like space of like, I wouldn't say I was being rebellious, but just like something was going on. Like I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, right? As a student, I feel like everyone, faculty-wise, is trying to figure out, okay, like, how can we help this person? How can we figure out or get to the bottom of it? So I feel like everyone was trying to sort of just do that. Like, okay, is it therapy? Is it like, obviously she lost her dad. Is like the school too hard? Like, what's going on? So I would say, yeah, I definitely had support in my photography / homeroom teacher, my dean as well, who's now like the head of the whole upper division at Horace Mann. At the time, she was just the dean of our grade, she's a doctor, Levenstein. Dr. Jessica Levenstein, she was an English teacher who just, she really cared. Like, she really cared. So I know that there were, those different individuals who just were like, they would look at me, but then really look at me like, are you good? Or are you good? And I'm definitely leaving off like a name or two. Oh, Sharon Cohen, she's the founder and CEO of Figure Skating in Harlem, knew me since I was 6 years old when I joined the program, and knew my dad, knew my family, a bunch of the, different counselors that were in the figure skating program also, like, knew my dad. So I feel like when that happened, it was just like, holy F, like, everyone was just like, wait a minute. And like I said, I'm like the oldest girl, so it was me and my younger sister as well. And I think that being in the girls, community definitely helped as well with just not feeling alone. But yeah, it was kind of sad to feel like that outer body experience of like, just like not doing what you're supposed to do, but not caring enough to do better, So yeah, it's tricky. And I definitely need to find more language to express it because it is very pivotal to my life, but I feel like it was so normalized. Like I was just trying to get through it, trying to just get to the end, just graduate, just finish it.
Yeah, because it feels like that's when photography began for you.
Yeah, no, literally, that's literally where it began. Like
I used to always say to my friends, like, I'm not creative like you or whatever, and they'll be like, no, girl, you're so creative. Really? And even starting this podcast, like, it really took me a while to even, like, get to this point because...
congratulations. It's so cool.
And it was because, like, for the longest, like, the only thing that was really, like, respected in my house was, the STEM careers. And... So nothing, like, I played the violin for, like, I think 8 years, but then I stopped right before I went to boarding school. And so, like, it brings me joy that when you were going through a tough time, like, you were able to kind of turn to something. I didn't even, like, have the means or the range to even realize that that was even an option. And, like, I wonder, like, who I would be if I, like, did. You know what I mean?
If you, like, stuck with your, like, violin or...
No, not just the violin, but, like, if I just, like... kind of explored who I was, like, creatively, and, like, I'm just thinking about, like, whether it was dance, whether it was an instrument, whether it was, like, visual arts, like, my parents, like, weren't really having it. Like, I'm happy to know that, like, during that time, like, that was, like, a creative outlet for you.
Yeah.
I kind of want to get into when you kind of the birth of your photography career. How did you navigate, like, post-college early opportunities for photography?
My story, just to give the short form version, There was a video and a song called All the Way Up, and there was a casting for like figure skaters to be in the video. One of my friends who is part of the figure skating in Harlem alumni programming, shout out to her, Sharon Del Murga. She was like, hey, do you want to like be in this video or like come to this set? And I literally was like, junior in college. It was like my first day of spring semester. And I was like, sure. So I went to this like video, and it was literally like All the Way Up, like the Fat Joe Remy Ma song, which is like Grammy nominated, which is kind of crazy because like ended up just like changing their lives too, right? And that was 2016. So I was on set, and it was a strip club in Queens on synthetic ice. And yeah, I really wish there was like behind the scenes footage from that day, because it was literally like the day that kind of like, you know, changed like the trajectory of my career. But I brought my camera and I took behind the scenes photos. And then I did some cold emailing, like reaching out to the producer, director, Remy Ma, Fat Joe's team, like, hi, I'm Florence, I was on set today. And long story short, the producer just kind of like took to my work and was like, yo, like you know, this person's eye is really crazy, and shared my work with the SVP of Atlantic Record, SVP of marketing.
So that's basically your first experience.
No, literally, yeah. Like this was like, I laugh sometimes because people always ask me like, of course, like how'd you get to what you're doing? And I think with celebrities, people really want to know like what's the thing? And I like to say that there's not a one size fits all for success, because I feel like my story was just, it was like, I don't want to say luck, but it was like chance. And then I was just, you know, when opportunity meets preparation, I think that's what it was. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I ended up just kind of taking the opportunity. The person who I mentioned was like the SVP of Atlantic's marketing team, was working with Gucci Mane, and he had just gotten out of prison in 2016. And so he came to New York, and like I said, I was in college. I like basically played hooky and went and followed Gucci Mane for 2 days around New York and took pictures of him. Went to the club, like went to Sirius XM radio, went to the Condé Nast building. This was all like very, very new for me. And was still in school, like was starting to overlap, like you said, the college and like the kind of professional career. Mm-hmm. And then Cardi came out with Bodak Yellow, like 2017. And basically the same person who was on the Gucci Mane team was also on the Cardi team, mm-hmm. and gave me the opportunity to go and capture her in Miami. For the Hip Hop Awards. That's the first time she performed Bodak Yellow on stage. And then, yeah, again, all that time I'm like ending college, going into like, or wanting to go into a professional career as a creative director. And I think I'm a Gemini as well. I think like a little bit of that, like, I don't know how horoscopy y'all are, but I feel like just that air sign, that like, you know, go with the flow. I think that's kind of, you know, that fearlessness was kind of what allowed me to...
Saying yes to opportunity.
Yeah, just like, and just jump for it and do it.
I know you call it like, before you said it was like a Delulu mindset, or like, you were talking about it like a negative, but I genuinely think like, and you said it was like luck, but I don't feel like it was like, I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like as a boarding school kid, like I always kind of like am envious of you guys that got to go to school in New York. Yeah, like because you guys are like true city kids. Like I felt like a fake New Yorker until I came back to NYU. But I feel like being in the city, but then also going to a school like Horace Mann, where you kind of like are given the kind of skills, or like you're kind of, you know, you had a community behind you, maybe like embolden you to like be like, I'm gonna go for these opportunities. I'm gonna cold email.
I mean, you don't think so? I mean, no, let me let you finish, because I want to.
But like, I don't know. This is just my assumption, but I'm like, I feel like growing up in New York City, like you just have access to meet these people. And whereas like, I feel like a lot of my friends who are pursuing like creative careers now, they
were
like
in boarding school.
Yeah, that were in boarding school. Like they were kind of away from the city for like 8 years. And it's like now they're coming back and they're like kind of starting from scratch of like building this network and meeting people. And it's like, people who went to school in the city and went to college in the city, they're like, oh no, like I've known this person, or I get these gigs because of X, Y, and Z person.
I do agree with that a little bit. I think sometimes I look back and I'm like, well, if I went to Wesleyan, like my career probably wouldn't have, you know, like I wouldn't have had the opportunity. But at the same time, like different strokes, different folks, right? Like you never know, you know, I guess why things happen or what things will lead to. And I feel like there's so many different universes, you know, where we're all doing so many different things. Yeah. So I understand the boarding school point, but at the same time, there's like the New York kid like myself who was like, oh, I wish I got like a real college experience or like a real away from home experience. You know what I mean? So I think it's just balance, but ultimately the
grass is always greener.
Yeah. And I think also the transition from late college into, just go back to your question, late college into like early career, like being a New Yorker, like a native New Yorker, also growing up like in a hair braiding salon, like on the block. I feel like those were the things that like gave me that like fearlessness, like my parents' entrepreneurship. Horace Mann was like a resource incubator, but I feel like I wasn't talking about like being a, you know, photographer there. I think I was just posting like stuff on Facebook and like, you know, people were like, oh wow, Flo's like really artsy. Like I got like biggest hipster, most artsy, like those are the superlatives I got like in the high school yearbook and stuff. Okay. So it definitely like set the tone for like me realizing that I was different from the pack. And I was very empowered being an artist there because I don't know, once I realized like, okay, well, I'm not wealthy. I'm not like getting great grades. I'm not on a sports team because I was figure skating, right? Like I wasn't like doing track or athletes or anything at school. Being like the artsy person, the artsy kid, I think that was like what gave me a little bit of like the confidence of like, okay, well, I'm good. Or like I love this work. I would spend all my time in the dark room. You know, I would go to my other classes with my hands smelling like the chemicals and like all that stuff. So I feel like that kind of later high school, you know, adolescent empowerment into college where it was bleak a little bit, and then back into like the professional space. I feel like a melting pot of like that 6 years sort of world was interesting. Also, I probably should mention like I graduated from Horace Mann wanting to go to an art school called SCAD and like didn't have great grades, so didn't get any scholarship money. Went to SUNY Albany for a year and a half, and my plan was like, okay, go to SUNY, like go to a SUNY that like I got accepted to, you know, make friends, like get better grades, and then apply again for like other colleges. I didn't end up, I think, leaving like my SUNY Albany experience with like the most amazing grades, or like just, you know, I don't know, like my plan was like, oh, you know, do really well here, apply to the same school, but like I ended up just leaving and coming back to the city, wanting to take a year off. My African aunt and uncle being like, no, like where are you going? Like you're not taking any time off. And then that's what ended up with me going to City College, which was great because their ad PR program was amazing. And yeah, like being in Harlem, I think, like I said before, being in New York and everything was definitely part of my story. So yeah, like you said, grass is always greener, and also you never know like what, you know, what.
I mean, I just want to tell you, like, I feel like, I don't know, a lot of people come up to me like, oh my God, you went to boarding school. Like, I just want to let you know, I'm jealous of you. I am so envious of the city kids who got to it sounds like your community in Harlem was such a, like, it has such a huge influence in your art, like you just said. And like the ability to kind of, you know, leave the Horace Mann bubble and then kind of go back, you know what I mean? Go back and forth. It was like, it was nice to have like a change in perspective, change in scenery. But like, that's just like me. Like, I wish I was closer to, you know, being away for 8 years because I was still at NYU.
Boarding school and then college, right?
Yeah. I do feel there is like a level of, there's a level of like separation between.
Yeah. I relate to that like a little bit just because my little brother did Prep 9 and he did Exeter, then he did Trinity College, and he's the youngest in the family and graduated 2 years ago. And I just remember like his kind of mental health journey and that transition from graduation back was the first time I kind of understood like what you're talking about. And he was like, you know, he went to like the local Harlem school. He was like on the basketball courts. Like he was definitely like, you know, in like the, you know, the Harlem streets as like a young person, and then he was just gone for like a long time. So I empathize with that, and I also feel like, you know, I hope there's a space as well for like Prep 9 or like boarding school peers that you have to like discuss that more. And also like the kids are all right, like, and the kids will be all right.
Yeah,
so, we're
definitely fine. It's just more so of like we're annoying. Like we just like to like lament about it. Yeah, like that is our thing. Yeah, it's just like, oh, like if I only grew up in New York or whatever. Like every time it gets like, I don't know. That's just like that's our thing. Maybe it's specific to us. I kind of want to segue and go into like the Met Gala. And so a few months ago, you actually shared like kind of the conversations that you had with like a photographer.
So yes, like in 2016, I like DM'd this guy who I ended up being like friends with actually, but he was one of the co-founders of like this big like photo events agency. And then his response was like, I kind of had to laugh because it's sort of a ridiculous ask or something like that. And I ended up actually being recruited to work with their agency by like someone else who worked there. Shout out to her. I won't say her name, but she basically brought me on. I was kind of doing a little bit of like events photography with them for a second. I'd already had the Cardi B work under my belt, the Gucci Mane work under my belt, was starting to kind of, I don't know, just do like cool editorial work. And I just felt like, you know, even though it's really interesting to be in the New York City like event space, like the money was just not really worth it for me. I ended up just kind of falling back on doing that. And then in 2022, I actually just got hit up by Vogue directly to like photograph the Met. So that was pretty crazy. And then when I told the story of like, you know, the full circle moment of it, I showed like the screenshot that you're referencing, the back to back. So I think even like to the day, like it was like May 2nd, like the actual day I shot that DM was the same day I photographed like the Met, like for the first time 6 years later. So that was pretty crazy. But yeah, you never know. I feel like that, like people really, really resonate with that story. And I'm so happy that that receipt is there. Cause it's like, you wouldn't believe me if I mean, maybe you would, but like if I just said it, you may not believe it, but yeah, like the DMs don't lie.
They don't lie.
The DMs
Would
don't
you
lie.
consider that your biggest career finesse?
I think my biggest career finesse is just pivoting from like being a celebrity photographer to being like a actual like editorial, just like regular photographer. Not regular, but like I think when I started like being a personal photographer for like Cardi, which I should probably define that more. So basically all her like first videos, like Bartier, Cardi, Press, WAP, Be Careful, basically like her Invasion of Privacy, the first album she put out, all like the behind the scenes, like for the videos, and then like her first 2 Met Gala appearances, her birthday party, like just different like, you know, milestones in her life. Like I wasn't with her every day, but like I got to just be pinned for like these milestone moments. So that was sort of like the extent of that personal photography career. And then, yeah, like kind of going from that to...
So it was a goal of yours to pivot?
Yeah, because I always knew that I always considered myself more of a photojournalist, a documentary photographer, and kind of going back to that forensic science, like lawyer, like young, you know, dream. I just like to get to the bottom of things. Like I was always asking questions. I was always just like thinking. Even as like an advertising student, I realized like, oh, do I want to be a strategist or a creative strategist? So all those kinds of things. Fast forward to being a photographer and realizing that there was, I don't know, just more for me beyond like being considered like someone that was doing celebrity photography. I think the finesse was leveraging that portfolio into other opportunities. And also like I've managed and like independently like done like most of my career, which I think a lot of people don't know. Like people are always like, who's your publicist, who's your manager? And like I'm not saying this like super proudly because I definitely wish I had more help and like did a bit more to like get that, you know, ecosystem around me, especially because like I'm 29 now. Like the first time I ever worked professionally with an artist was like 21. So it's been like 7 to 8 years. You know, I probably could have like got my ducks more in a row. But yeah, I think the biggest finesse was probably just, you know, landing some like super dope accolades without, you know, having all of that, you know, behind me, but then also pivoting, like I said, from celeb work into just like general editorial work. Like I've shot like campaigns for Athleta, Bank of America, Nike, you know, all these different other brands, you know. So I think Apple Music, Reebok. So I think that's probably like the thing I'm most proud of.
Got you. Do you feel like the changing celebrity culture kind of affected your work with celebrity photography?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is like, I always knew I wanted to have the most autonomy over my brand, my business, my whatever. Like I didn't like the feeling of, even as a young person, I didn't like the feeling of, you know, the disposableness of it all. Like if we're both photographers and I don't know, Taylor Swift needs someone to go with her on tour. If I'm not available, you're available, okay, you get the job. You know, if you're not available, the next person, you know, there's just like a roster. And I felt like even though I had built such a beautiful connection with the team, you know, at Atlantic and with Cardi and everything. I remember like specifically when I worked with, and I can say this because I've like talked to his his manager about this before. But like I remember I went to Hawaii and I worked with them. I came back and my phone like wasn't working. And they reached out to me and they couldn't contact me, and then like I just never worked with them again because like they just couldn't get to me, so they just needed the next person. And I remember that being so like, you know, like like you just forgot about me like that. Yeah. With Cardi as well, I think there was a certain energy of like, okay, like can you be here and do this? Or like, can you like, you know, come to LA? Can you come to, it was really LA, really just, can you come here and can you take photos? And I feel like realizing, one, how willing I was to do that was great at that age. But then I also feel like for the high highs were also low lows, right? Of like people being like, oh, like Cardi's doing this. Like, why aren't you with her? Or like, why aren't you, I don't know. Like people just expected me to be with her all the time. And I'm like, can you guys let me live? Like, I'm just, like, I don't even know what this path is. I don't even know, you know, what God has in store for me with this. So I felt like that kind of sucked a little bit of the
glamour.
Something like there was something about that just humbled me quick, you know. And then even with like the internet, like credits, you know, there were so many impressions I think on my work that like I also like didn't really get, and you know, whether or not things were just reposted by blogs or like people just screenshot and like, you know, you see it go viral or whatever. So I feel like there was a certain disassociation I had with like that early. And I think that was helpful because I realized I didn't like how it felt. I didn't like, I just didn't like how it felt. And I just realized, all right, I have to find my own voice and like be able to take my actual work and my eye and my actual talent and put it in a space where I can, like I said, just have the most, you know, ownership over that. And I think that also helped give me more respect amongst the artists I did work with, because it's like, oh, like, you know, I would come to set and be like, oh, Flo, you just did this, did that. And it wasn't just like I was relying on, you know, one
like
person
like
or one thing.
Like one type of photographer. Like, you like the aspect. Like, you seem like a multi-hyphenate, like someone who likes to move into a lot of different things. So
I definitely consider myself that. Like, I feel like even though I started off loving photojournalism, street photography, I wanted to be, you know, New York Times, like Magnum photographer. I feel like, you know, that's how I always approached, I just always loved that kind of photography, just like honest, real, like lifestyle, like, you know, now I work with more production and stuff.
I saw some of your work from BLM.
Yes.
Would you say that type of work or that type of photography is something that gives you more energy?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the New York Times Harlem figure skating work as well. Like that kind of, like that kind of just narrative. We were just talking about narrative with one of your friends, actually, storytelling. I feel like that was what I wanted more of to do. Just, you know, show, like, it's great to do BTS and it's great to do, like, you know, photo shoots, but I feel like storytelling was always what I really wanted to get back to. And part of me moving to Miami was to hopefully find more opportunities to do work in that space of storytelling with news and with documentary photography in other parts of the world. So with Miami, I just feel like being closer to, like, you know, Jamaica, Cuba, like Latin America, South America, I'm hopeful that I'll get to kind of reroute myself in that kind of more like serious photography. Not that like celebrity photography isn't serious, but I just felt like I really, like, I don't know how to explain it. Like there was something that like just happened when I would see like really, really strong, like, you know, New York Times work or like photojournalism work. Like I always like loved that kind of work. Like I want to just, you know, be an artist like in India somewhere, like taking photos of like Holi for a week, like you know, and just like being a fly on the wall, literally. So that's what I hope to get back to.
Got you. I kind of want to pivot into a more meta conversation about photography. You know, photography can sometimes be used as a form of activism, you know, during like historical events or just like pivotal times in history, whatever. Do you feel like photographers have a responsibility to use their work as a form of activism?
I think photography is an art form first and foremost. I think that the same way you mentioned, like just being multi-hyphenate, like it's so interesting because with the BLM work, like George Floyd died like the same week as my birthday, and we were already quarantined, and I was in my house. Like, I remember specifically not watching the video until like after like my birthday, because I was like, I just don't want to like be in that space, because I was like, I don't know, I'm already like stuck in the house. It's my birthday, and I remember going out and just being like, I'm a protester first and foremost because I just think this is fucked up. And of course, like, you know, everyone was really angry, rightfully so. And I think the reaction to the photos was stronger in part because like in the captions I would write on Instagram that went with the photos I posted, I like just used my voice. But like first and foremost, you know, I was just I was someone attending something, I was using a tool, an art tool I had to take pictures, and then it was associated with activism. But I think that people have to be careful with the way that we connect the dots or like want to associate, you know what I'm saying? Like certain, like it's like, I don't know, like it's just tricky. I think artists should be allowed to be artists first, and I think that the intention should really just come from the artist, honestly. And even with, like even answering this is like, I'm like, like how do I even answer this, right? Because there's a, like you said, there's a certain cancel culture, there's a certain like political correctness. We just talk a little bit about like, you know, the election before we started recording.
Do you feel a responsibility to protect your subjects?
I feel a responsibility to create beautiful artwork, to create a beautiful reflection of a moment, to get great lighting, to make sure people, you know, look. I feel like I want my images to represent what things may feel like in my perspective in real life. Like if I'm sitting here, this moment, you know, the lens I would use, the editing I would do to capture like a portrait of you here, versus like if you were standing over there, versus if you were, you know, in your room, versus if you were in the balcony. I feel like it's more just for me about creating an accurate and beautiful representation of something I'm seeing with my eyes. And my root intention or my root perspective or approach towards people, I think is, or I would like to think is pure and honest. And I think that that's why people like the photos, because I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to misrepresent them. Specifically with Cardi, I remember people really appreciated seeing a side of a celebrity that was like, I guess, not seen before.
You work across many different types of photography, whether it's like editorial, celebrity, you talked about it. Do you tap into different parts of your brain when you're shooting different types of work? Like, I know you kind of touched on it a little bit.
That's a good question. I do. Sometimes I think I'm more of a photographer/producer. Sometimes I'm more of like a photographer/ like journalist. Sometimes I'm more of like just like a project manager, vibe manager. Sometimes it gets very technical. Sometimes you have to just go with the flow. You know, you'll go in with a certain impression or an idea of what things will be like, and it won't go that way. So yeah, I definitely think that's the beauty of it too, and I think that's the beauty of specifically with my journey. I think that's something people kind of hire me for, is that ability to be agile or to like kind of adjust. Yeah, to flow, if you will.
To be honest, like a lot of us are in like tough phases in our creative careers. Like I guess, you know, in our hustle era, in our Finesser era. And so it's been like super helpful to see your career. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the interview, like when we saw you as a prep alum, we were like, I don't know, it was empowering to see one of our own to do it. Cause then it's like, oh, we can definitely do it. Like, look, Flo did it.
That really means a lot. Sorry, I just have to, that's really cool.
It's really hard to break away from what you thought you was gonna be. Like if you know what I mean? Whether it's like, I thought I was gonna be like a corporate girly forever, and that's what I wanted. And it's like now I'm having this kind of reckoning where I was like, I actually really don't want to be a corporate girly forever. Like I guess we could just in general use some advice from you. Sure. And so when is the last time you were humbled, and like how did you handle that?
Last time I was humbled.
You are a Black woman in photography, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is a predominantly white male space. And also you are on the younger side. And so like, you know, there may be people who probably, you know, I'm not sure how much disrespect or undervalue they kind of face in the space, but like, I'm sure people look at you and it's like, how did she get here? Or like, how did she get to do that? Like, she's so young. Like, I don't know how photography is in terms of like, I know a lot of industries that I'm even like in corporate, people feel like you need to kind of prove yourself. You got to pay your dues. And so I wonder, like, you know, you said your first opportunity was like, you know, happened when you were 21. How is it? I don't know the
last time I feel humbled, but I feel like I can speak to just, I guess, the general spirit of humility. Like, I feel like as a photographer, there have been times where I feel like I've surprised people on sets, just with like, you know, my ability to, you know, operate the room or to communicate. Like, honestly, specifically, even recently with like the VP work, I felt like just there was a little bit of micromanaging going into like how that day went. And I just remember having to be like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know why I know why I chose this backdrop. I know why I chose this setting. Like, you know, just that moment, I feel like was a really great reminder, because that's, you know, the highest, that was like the most, you know, the most high profile, you know, person I've ever worked with. So I feel like that was a really great reminder of the importance of being yourself, being confident. I hired an all-black team, and I was so grateful just to like be there and representative of, you know, the melanin and like the, you know, just the creative community in like in the White, like to be in the White House or in you know, the official vice president residence with, you know, the knowledge that like people have to listen to me. This is my mood board. Like, this is what we're doing. This is how we're moving. I feel like that was a great reminder of just, you know, the importance of taking on the confidence and the power. I feel like I didn't really answer the question either, but there's just, I feel like every day, like, the world humbles you. And I also want to just flag, like, we have to be really careful, right? I think as women of color and as people of color, there's a narrative that I think we almost want to feed into of like, well, since you're this, like, what are the struggles that you've dealt with? And I've been very like aware that even though I did have, you know, not the most ideal like upbringing, like, you know, no one wants to lose a parent, no one wants to feel like uncomfortable in a private school or whatever. I think I'm very like cautious of not adopting a struggle narrative because people think that I'm supposed to, because of how I look, you know what I mean? Like, have one. And I think just the way that we frame those questions and the way that we have those conversations are just really important to just keep neutrally, right? Like, what was your experience? Or like, you know, can you speak to it? I think specifically in the beginning of my career, I remember people asking these questions and me being like, man, I went to like a private school, and I was a figure skater, and like I just remember having to check people on their like inherent, you know, almost like wanting to give me that like bias just because of like, I don't know, whatever the narrative is. So yeah, I think growing up, like my mom, you know, like I said, I'm a first generation American, just some of the mentality and the mindset that I grew up with, the things that my mom had to overcome to even get to this country and to be in this country, just gave me that level of like confidence, but also humility. Like, you know, like how moms or like African parents or mothers, like they'd be like the strongest ones, but also like the most background, most low key characters. So that kind of tightrope walking, I think, has been very helpful. And yeah, I think knowing your place or paying your dues is a very interesting concept. I think, again, being African, there's also that energy of, you know, just humility that you get, you know, like there's a lot of respectability politics in like the household, like, you know, and that's the whole other conversation.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. I guess like for me, I've just been in instances where like, you know, I'm currently in a weird career pivot right now. It's a pretty ambitious career pivot. I don't think so. It's that ambitious, but like
Are people telling you it's ambitious, or?
Yeah, people telling me, I feel like I'm constantly in spaces where like I'm, you know, forced to be like, not forced, but like, you know, people humbling me. I'm trying to figure out like how to discern between, you know, getting advice from your elders and people who've been through something before and have more wisdom versus like racism, ageism, sexism. Like I'm trying to figure out like how to, and that's more so where that question was rooted from. It's like, how do you like separate that? Because there is like, you know, there was pieces of advice I was giving, like, yeah, you should do this. And it's like, it seemed constructive in like my development, but there were also some.
Or constructive.
Yeah, constructive. And so it's like, there also have been some conversations I leave and I'm like, I'm so sorry, but that was giving hater energy. I just feel like if I looked
That's
different.
real.
Yeah, and it's like, it just was giving like, who do you think you are, like, to do something like this? And I find myself constantly struggling between those two emotions. And it's like, I'll like come back and tell my friends and they're like, yeah, bitch, it was giving hater. It was giving hater. And so it's like, I don't know, like, I don't want to project any of my feelings or things onto you, but I want to know if that's something that you've kind of had to struggle with before and be like, okay, I'm going to take this or I'm not going to take this, or like, how do you navigate kind of a lot of maybe advice that's been thrown your way?
Yeah, I feel like I adopted a little bit of a sense of paranoia growing up in like like being young and working with Cardi and then seeing people sort of also latch to like little sis, like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like I used to hate that word. Even the idea of mentorship, like it took me a while to even open up my brain to just entertaining mentors. I felt like people abuse the term or just almost like, I don't know, I didn't like the energy around like, oh, my mentor, or like, oh, you know, I'm your big sis, like call me, hit me, you know, and I've mentioned the disposable element. I remember specifically I had a really unfortunate instance with someone who was like a big sis to me, who just like literally like stopped talking to me on some weird, you know, on some weird shit. And I think that ultimately the empowerment and the independence and the lessons that we learn from making that discerning decision of like, okay, I didn't need that, you know, let me, you know, take that with a grain of salt, or, you know, don't take it at all. I think that's honestly what life's about, that filtering, you know, like as a photographer, filters are something that, you know, we know very well, and just the way you look at something, the perspective, the lens you use, the edit you put on it. I think that ability to, I don't know, sometimes copy and paste or like copy and cut, the different things that people pour into us is so important. And I think as a photographer, just to like actually answer your question, I had a few different lanes of like I had a little bit of advertising advice, a little bit of like the music industry, then I had a little bit of like just social media, like aunties, uncles, friends, like people just who I became cool with from there. Then there's like the in real life, going back to Harlem, being like, oh my God, Flo, like you're popping, you're doing this and that. And then you just knowing like, okay, well, I'm not where I want to be yet, or I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So I feel like all of that, just like overthinking, analysis, ultimately, like, you know, maybe you can relate to this too. Like you're the one that's sitting with yourself at night, looking yourself in the mirror, you know, praying, like sitting there, like, you know, trying to figure it out. And I feel like, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, not to be so cliche about it. But I feel like, you know, too much is given, also much is expected. There's so many phrases that I feel like really relate to, you know, both of the, like the pivot you're doing now, and I think the pivot I did then. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap there. But ultimately, I feel like, you know, it's really, you know, we have one life. I really believe that we were all sent here for a reason. I believe in going with your gut. I believe in trusting, you know, the process. And I believe that what's for you is for you, not only opportunity-wise, but, you know, the people, the tribe, the advice. And I really believe in intuition, too. Like, you know, like you said, like when it's like, is that, you know, hater energy? Oh, you know, is that someone projecting? Oh, is that, you know, whatever. So I just hope that we can keep that purity and that happiness and that joy, you know, like as we get older, you get more and more jaded. I feel like, I think there was a question about jadedness too. So it's funny. I said that, but like, I think more and more, you know, you just learn how to decipher, and you just hope that you can keep that, honestly, that passion and that purity for what you love.
I guess because you mentioned the whole mentor-mentee thing, do you ever take on the position of a mentor? Do you feel a pressure to bring Black women up with you? Do you, like, you know, also, like, I feel like I've seen a lot of articles where it's like, you know, first Black woman to photograph the Met Gala. Do you feel this pressure to represent?
It's really, honestly, it's tough for me. I feel like I mentioned, like, ADHD earlier. I think that like the stimuli from like the internet, like social media and like the DMs, and people just want to connect, right? Like people want to connect. They want to get coffee. They want to get lunch. They want to, you know, they want to support. They want you to support. They want to send you flyers. There's just so many things going on. And I have just learned to free myself, honestly, from expectations. I feel like paying it forward is so important. And I feel a little bit of guilt sometimes of just knowing that like I don't have that personality type yet to like show up for people the way I want to. And that's really tough for me, because I think that I wouldn't be where I was if people didn't show up for me or like give me opportunities. I don't know, like sometimes I think people want to assume that mentee role, or like want to be in your orbit, in your circle for like personal gains, which is like, you know, I get it. Like, of course, like you want me to tell you how to do something. You want me to like give you advice and give you my experience. Yeah. And I think at the same time, like that approach versus like, you know, the mentor-mentee approach where you like actually befriend someone first, build the actual connection, and then it organically flows. I think more people need to understand that's the kind of, well, in my opinion, that's the way that it works best, like the authentic connection. The mentors that I wish I had, I didn't really show up for me in that same way. Like two specific people come to mind where I'm just like, I'm always like, dang, like y'all put me on, or like, you know, you guys were there, but like they just weren't. And I think my attraction to people who are almost like emotionally unavailable or just like not available is something that I've been trying to work through and understand more. Like, why do I gravitate towards certain kinds of creative professionals, right? Versus not. And I also am trying to check that so that I don't become that kind of creative professional, or so that I don't become that kind of person to someone else who is authentically trying to connect and build. But it's tough. It's tough, especially because New York City, there's so many of us. There's so many people who move here, so many people who are hungry, so many people on the internet. But I think you have to really just do what works best for you, and honestly just hope for the grace and like the understanding from other people too, that it's not personal, or like, that it's not about them. Usually it's just about us. But I definitely do think I need to do better with like kind of adopting more of that mentorship role. And I think part of like the agency that I'm hoping to start, Flow and Focus, is an aim to use my platform, or use, like you said, like the first or like the blessings I've had in my career to put other people on who just like, who just want to be in the room, who just want to just know, okay, well, how do I do this? Or how do I meet this person? I feel like I realized as a single individual, I felt that pressure in a way that wasn't really positive for me, but having an outlet or having something else that wasn't like me directly, but maybe like an agency or like a platform could kind of help be a buffer in between, that you have to protect your space. You have to protect yourself, and like we're growing, we're young.
Energy, yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot, and I'm sure with the podcast and the success of the podcast as well, you're probably gonna. I'll ask you that same question in a year, and I wonder what your answer would be too.
Like I lock myself in a room and like literally turn off the lights.
But I feel like you're very good at like, I don't know. I feel like being in corporate. I kind of asked you this when we like met up. I feel like being in corporate America, and for as long as you've been at your company, I feel like that level of communications, like you kind of have to like
I say this, but like I'm probably just gonna face it and just be like, I don't know, like I don't know where this is gonna take me, so I don't know who I'm gonna become and how it's gonna affect me. But like right now, off of like knee-jerk reaction, like I get overstimulated very quickly, and I'm the type of person to like go in my room and like not really engage. But like I also know that I know what I'm choosing, what career, what path I'm choosing, and like being public and what that, the pros and the cons.
The pros and the cons.
And I also want to ask you, like, what is your favorite photo? What is the favorite photo you've ever taken? We kind of want to show it on the screen.
Good question. My favorite photo I've ever taken is of the figure skating in Harlem. Girlies, the young woman of the program. It was about 5-6 years ago, and it was a photo story. The article was called "When I Skate, It Just Feels Free," and one of the photos ended up making it to the cover of the Times. So it was like huge for me. Like, but yeah, my favorite photo is like, I mean, there's so many from like their competitions, but like they're like lined up and like waiting to like go out, or like lined up and like cheering for each other on like on the boards, like the sideboards of like the rink.
Yeah,
I just feel like. The black and white edit of it, the skin and the story, the ice, like, Black Girl, White Ice is a title I recently used for like a talk I did. And I feel like just those images live rent free in my head forever. I think those are my favorite images. Yeah, for sure.
To end, what would you say is any advice that you have for any up and coming photographer? Or any Black woman, any Black person who wants to be a photographer?
Yeah, I honestly, my biggest advice is just to know yourself, take that time to learn yourself. I remember people reminding me when I was like coming up, meditate, get a therapist, like, focus on your mental health. And I didn't realize how much moving around and like being available for jobs and going, here and there would kind of, I don't know, it kind of turned me into someone else a little bit, or I normalized a certain level of like, it's entertainment industry. Like you're at the service of the entertainers. And I feel like I wish I paused and took more time to understand like, who is Flo? Like, what does Flo, like, yes, Flo can do these things, but what serves Flo best? And I feel like I hit a little bit of like a tough spot. I remember, I don't know if you're allowed to talk about drugs on here, but like, I remember like when I started smoking.
You're allowed.
When I started smoking weed. And I remember like during the pandemic, it got really bad. And I'm actually still like trying to like wean off of this like attachment to it. But I remember like coping with anxiety with marijuana heavily. And it was just never a thing. Like I grew up an athlete. Like I grew up in an African household. Like it just wasn't a thing. And I remember being like, fuck, like I thought I needed this thing to help me normalize the stress levels of my career, and I didn't. You know, you honestly don't need anything. Well, maybe if you're clinically, diagnosed, or you actually need stuff. You need stuff, but I feel like, like personally, I used to feel like, even with like alcohol, like the normalization of just like social drinking. Like you'll go to an event, free drinks here, there, and I feel like I wish that I took a second and like just thought a bit more about like, my personality type and how my personality type would show up in the spaces that I had to show up. Mm-hmm. And so now, in my later 20s, I feel like I'm really grateful for just accepting, who I am. Even coming here, I was like, dang, I just got off a flight. Like, I wish I could just like, give it a little more glam, get a little more outfit. But then I was like, like I'm okay with being a little oriented or being a little like all over the place. And I think that's someone who, is appearing now that like I wish like, I just wish that was like my 24, 25-year-old mentality as well. And I know like that may sound, I'm sure some people will watch this like, girl, like you're 29, like you're not that much older, but I feel like I was around a lot of older people. I was around a lot of like older things, it was just sensory overload, like a lot of stimuli. So I think that the best advice would be for women of color and for artists, especially ones who want to go into the entertainment spaces, is to make sure, you're looking at yourself in the mirror every day and just really having that like that man in the mirror or woman in the mirror or however you identify in the mirror conversation. And before you put on, your gear, before you step into that space, before you show up for your call time, just making sure you have peace with who that person is first and foremost, because you can't run and hide from, who you really are. No amount of photos or jobs or editing can mask that. So yeah, that's definitely my advice. Know yourself.
And I think that's a beautiful note to end on, honestly.
Yay.
Like, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This was such a great conversation, honestly. And you just have such a great energy. And so I'm so thankful that you grace OOT with your presence.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to look back, when you're season 6, 7, 8, and like, wow, I was in like season 2, I guess will be my...
No, you would be you're not in season 2. It's like, we're going to just keep it going, I think.
Oh,
we're
okay.
just going to keep it going.
Okay, so not like cap the episode.
We're not going to do it season by season, I think.
Okay.
But that is also a growing and evolving...
Yeah, discussion. Yeah, I'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah. I'm so grateful. This is
We're
cool.
happy to have you in this chapter, for sure.
Thank you.
And if you guys like what you saw, make sure to follow us at Honor Terms Pod, and you can follow me, your host, at UTomZ, and you can find our beautiful guests at
FLONGALA on Instagram and Twitter. Flo and Ngala, my name.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Yeah.